There's a man who contradicts. Wait, he's the type of guy who tell you there's no first place, but he's part of a race.
So it's a fantastic idea. Let me ask you this: have you got it written down anywhere, or the idea at least, so that some of the viewers can go and take a look at this idea and maybe put forward some of their thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've got a website, www.nationsofsanity.com. There's also a Facebook page and a YouTube channel of the same name. And on the website, I do have because the peace agreement as well that I proposed is actually broken down into a 3-part agreement. So it's not just one agreement to have the Napper's Law.
Oh, understood. Yeah, put lines.
It's actually a 3-part agreement, and the 3 basic dimensions of the agreement is what I believe is what's necessary to actually establish it as law in the real world. And basically it breaks down like this. You've got part 1, which is just the basic agreement. So if everyone agreed to part 1, then they're basically agreeing to establish the non-aggression principle as law. Then part 2 is what I call lines in the sand. And now what that's about is about setting limits of tolerance over differing interpretations. Because even though the principle itself is relatively black and white, there are still certain fuzzy edges and grey areas where people might sort of disagree over exactly where you draw the line.
Yes.
So what we're saying is you can have that grey area, but there needs to be a limit to how far people can push the differing interpretations, so they don't push it into the black, so they don't infect the black and white with these grey areas. So you've still got that line where we say, okay, all right, this is the grey area, but this is where we draw the line and say, no, this is definitely violating the non-aggression principle. This is that would be what you call an international standard, a universal standard. And then part 3 of the agreement is rightful ownership. Because it's no good having a law that says don't steal if we are not in agreement over who owns what and how we define rightful ownership. And that's basically would be ratifying rightful ownership through the non-aggression principle. And that's based on the idea that property rights are an extension of the self-ownership that I mentioned before. So you own yourself, therefore you own your actions, which in addition to meaning that you're responsible for your actions in the sense of being criminally responsible if you commit a crime, you also own your actions in the sense that if you create something, you own that as your property. If you build a house, it's your house. And stuff like that, and the voluntary trade obviously comes in line with that. So it's just about, so that would be the 3 basic sort of dimensions of the agreement that you'd need. Because when I first sort of came up with the idea, it was kind of like it was just the peace agreement, just make the non-aggression principle the law. But the more I kind of thought about it and had people like yourself coming in and questioning it and that, the more I realised that there were fuzzy edges and we needed to do something about that. We can't just ignore it and we can't just sort of pretend it's not there.
Yes,
but
that's
we also can't let it sort of compromise the whole principle, because you still got this nice objective principle.
Yes.
So I thought, well, okay, we'll draw some limits of tolerance, some lines in the sand where we can say, okay, there is a grey area, we won't enforce that, but we will enforce the black and white, and this is where we draw the line and say, definitely a violation of the non-aggression principle.
That's an excellent idea.
Sorry.
No, that's an excellent idea. No, go ahead, you're on the flow.
Oh, well, no, and I was just going to say that when you've got that as a foundation of law that then defines a free society, what you can then do is use the freedom of voluntary association to then create voluntary collectives where you can then establish higher standards. Because a lot of people might say, well, I want to associate or be part of a regulated market or be part of a society even that has higher standards than just the non-aggression principle, than just crime. And it's like, well, okay, well, you can implement that through voluntary interactions. Because what the point of establishing the non-aggression principle as the law is that's what's saying that's the law. That's where we define crime. So that's something that's a standard imposed on anyone and everyone. Whereas anything above that or beyond that, you would have to get their agreement for. So say I said to you, okay, look, this isn't part of the non-aggression principle, but Cedric, I want to start this club, and part of this club, you have to agree to these other rules that have nothing to do with the non-aggression principle, but just part of rules of being in this club.
A private club.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's a little bit like saying, if I invite you into my home, you've got to take your shoes off. That doesn't mean I'm making it illegal to wear shoes in your own home. It just means that in my house, part of the invitation, I'm attaching this condition, and people have that right. If I want to be part of this, I can set the terms of my involvement.
Bylaws, in effect, yeah. So as bylaws work. And it's a fantastic idea, beautifully thought out as well, Matt. In fact, I'm looking forward to having a read of the documents.
There's a man who contradicts. Wait, he's the type of guy who tell you There's no first place, but he's part of a race.